So when we were both kind of new to the podcasting industry, my next guest actually had me on one of his early episodes of his Coming Clean podcast. It was such a great conversation. It was about sobriety. It was about growth, life after sobriety. And I was really taken with him. So over the last couple of years since we had that conversation, we follow each other on social media, and I've watched Peter Estevez grow in his reach, is in his impact, in his messaging. And we were in contact again, and we decided we wanted to have a conversation on the Mastering Midlife podcast. So I'm so grateful that he came back to tell us what he's up to and what kind of impact he's making on the world. Peter was born in Mexico City, Mexico, and migrated to the United States at the age of 10. Peter is an entrepreneur and a partner in several companies in the energy sector in his country of birth. By the way, if you go to his LinkedIn, there's so much more that Peter does. Doesn't even do it justice how many irons he has in the fire and how many balls he keeps in the air. As a sober person in recovery for over 18 years, Peter is an advocate for recovery, as well as the writer and author of the upcoming book, From Lies to Riches, 13 Steps to a Healthy Life in Recovery, and is the host of the Coming Clean podcast. And by the way, I would read that book. Very, very few people who really get my interest, and I want to read the book. Peter, thank you for being here.
Mark, what a pleasure and good to see you again, my friend.
Before I turned the microphone on, you and I were having a conversation about our growth, about where we came from when I first started my podcast, when you first started your podcast. You've been uber success. People look you up. You were so successful in business. Just you had your hands in every fire. You've built things from the ground up. You've merged things. You've just been in the world. And now you're doing something completely different. You're giving back in a way that I haven't seen in many people at all. Why are you shifting your focus from making all the cash to giving back to the world?
Thank you, Mark. But I also been broke. I want to remind you of that. I've been broke and I've been broken. So it has not been, it has not been an easy ride. And I think those are the lessons that teach us the most amount of humility and the importance of what our contribution and our legacy is going to be once we're gone, right? I came from a very dysfunctional background, and my parents could only give me what they had. And what they had at the
All
time.
of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what they had at the time was something that I could not appreciate. But I do so much today as a divorced father, single father, raising a son on my own. And I wanted my son to be proud of me. I wanted my son and the generation after me to realize that I came into this world, into this universe, to make an impact and make a difference, not to take, but to give back.
Hold on, I'm going to stop you there. Why? Why do you want, because a lot of people have that notion. Why did it matter enough to you to actually shift your focus in such a powerful way?
Well, my background. I'm in recovery. I've been in recovery 20 years, and is often say in addiction or in alcoholics, as I am, every form of alcoholic, that we are selfish and self-centered. Okay, and I was selfish and self-centered, and I took it to the extreme. I was a more whore. I wanted more of everything. And I was a blazer, bulldozer that went through life destroying things. Okay, grabbing whatever he could, because I was so desperate from who I was, without knowing that I was more than who I thought I was.
Would you say some of that drive also drove you to monetary and business success?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right, that double-edged sword.
There's no question. I was so desperate to get out of where I came from, that I had this goal in mind to get to the next phase of my life, right? But the reality is that I didn't know how. I didn't have a proper structure. I had a dysfunctional social conditioning. I was rough on the edges. I had no emotional intelligence, so I was self-destructive. And by being self-destructive, when we don't love ourselves, we don't love anything, we don't love anyone, and we destroy everything when we destroyed everyone. Okay, so that growth and that passion, that self-discovery, came out of recovery. Okay, out of knowing who I am and knowing that I didn't like myself at the time, because I had certain events in my life that had conditioned me to believe a certain way. But when I destroyed those patterns, when I disrupt those behaviors, when I adopted a new belief system, I realized that my core being was always to have a purpose. My core being was always to have a mission. I just didn't know how to, I had not found it yet. But when I discover it, when that same little boy that hated his father, didn't like his father, didn't have any respect for his father, today appreciates and value his father, because I realized that my father could only give me what he had been given. Okay. So why is that passion? Why is that passion to serve and to make a difference and to have an impact and to contribute to society and to leave a legacy? Because I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for my father, for my great grandfather, and for my father's 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 father. Okay.
Oof,
Because they do not have an opportunity.
felt that.
Okay. So I have a responsibility, and that is the greatest gift I can give my son, for him to feel proud of who he is and where he came from, and to dismantle all those beliefs that I had inherited. It's my responsibility to do that. And and not only, not only to my, not only to my family, but to my culture.
Tell me more about that. Why your culture?
Well, I'm Hispanic. I was born in Mexico City. I'm an immigrant to this country. But this is a country that has given me everything, every opportunity, an education, an opportunity to succeed, an opportunity to live the American dream and beyond. Okay. And I embrace it and I respect it and I cherish that. But there is so many in my community, my culture where I come from, that have not had that opportunity or have not embraced it as much as I have. And the only reason is because of education. Okay. Education and financial literacy are the greatest forms of freedom. Okay. When I was able to discover that and channel it with emotional intelligence, I'm able to make an impact. Okay. And with making an impact and with knowledge and wisdom and information comes responsibility. So now I have a responsibility and a commitment to go back to my community and champion for them.
Wow, I'm really moved by that. That hit home. I was just thinking actually about all the Latina people that I have in my life. I have lots of successful people, but also the people who are more blue collar, who have built businesses without education, uh, couldn't work any harder. But that financial literacy and that education piece, which is missing to take them to the next level, is, I'm just kind of thinking in my own real world place where I'm watching people just be so entrepreneurial and incredible. And I never had that financial literacy either. I didn't grow up with that. So even when I made money, I had no idea what to do with it. So I lost it all, right? So it made absolutely no sense to me. But I do want to take you back because there's a little piece that you skipped over, not intentionally, I know, but from being this horrible self-centered, successful, but, just wrecking everything around in person, to all of a sudden self-help and growing and being better, right? There's that point in the middle. What got you? Now, I know you were in recovery. What got you? Because you had a break to become something new. What got you into recovery and got you to actually listen that something else has to happen?
I got sober in 2000, and I worked the program of recovery, the 12-step program, for 2 years. And when I got sober, I was living in San Antonio, Texas, and I moved to north of Houston, a community called, suburban community called the Woodlands. Okay.
Called the what? I'm sorry.
The Woodlands.
The Woodlands. Okay.
Yeah, and the Woodlands is a liver to beaver community. Trophy wives, corporate world, running trails, jogging trails. Pretty people, pretty cars. Everything's pretty. White picket fence, the dream world, right? And I fell right back into my trap. What I realized at the time was that I did not need alcohol to get drunk. Okay.
Yeah, no shit.
I could get drunk on lying, cheating, deceiving, controlling, manipulating, womanizing, which was one of my worst and taboos, habits, isms, whatever you want to call it. And my wife, who actually had given me an ultimatum in 2000 when I was still drinking, had moved with me. And we're living a happy married life. So I thought, okay. But I was sober, but I was drunk. Okay. I was a dry drunk. The same patterns of behaviors that I exhibited before getting sober from alcohol, I was exhibiting as a dry drunk. And my relationship with my wife, who was actually the love of my life, the mother of my son, a woman that I always saw myself with her forever, to death do us part. Had she continued her life drinking, she continued drinking. I really didn't it didn't bother me, but it got progressively worse. And as it got progressively worse, our relationship got worse. We became distant. We were not communicating as well. Uh, but there was a lot of things that were happening in my life at the same time. My mother died in 2008. Uh, and I had become distant from my parents in the last few years because sobriety brings a lot to the surface. It brings clarity, and it brings a lot of questions, and it brings a lot of resentments, and
A lot of pain, a lot
a
of
lot
things
of
you don't want
pain.
to look at.
Yeah. And I was sober, but I was not doing recovery. I was not peeling the onion. I was not addressing the issues. I was not going to the court of the issues, right? And so by manifesting the same behaviors, I had not addressed everything that needed to be addressed. So my mother dies in 2008. The economy is one of the worst economy in the world. So it impacted everybody. Okay. I was broken. I lost 52 plus properties. I was, the situation was horrible. My wife and I decided to invest our last money in the savings account in a spa, a huge, uh, fancy upscale spa, which was the worst mistake in the world. And I only did that because I knew there was something wrong in my marriage. I didn't know what it was. So I wanted to throw money at it. That's all I knew how to do. I didn't know how to do anything else. I equated love with being a provider, with solving problems with money. Okay. Zero emotional intelligence. Um, 3 months after the spa opens, my wife comes to me and tells me she wants a divorce and she's leaving me. She met somebody else. And it literally took me by surprise. I knew we had problems, but I never, ever thought this woman would leave me. And throughout
So
the
this is all after you drink. So you're stone cold sober.
I'm Stockholm sober.
So the business problems, the marital, everything's happening, and you're stone cold sober.
My mother dies. My business collapsed. My wife asked me for a divorce. And during the proceedings of the separation and the divorce filing, my father dies. Okay. And
I'm feeling you, because when in 2009, stone cold sober, I lost everything. My marriage fell apart, right? And I was so mad because I wasn't drinking. I was working I was, and it still, happened, right? So I had such a resentment about that. So
yeah,
I'm feeling you.
okay.
You're not drinking, but your world still falls apart.
Yeah. And I'm hating the world. I went into the poor me syndrome, right? So my father dies, my mother dies, business is lost, wife asks me for a divorce. Wife is having some serious issues with alcohol. And now I find myself raising my 7-year-old son as a single father in a big empty home. And I don't know what to do.
Hmm.
So what I did do was go back to recovery. I went back to a 12-step meeting of recovery. And, I never forget this, Mark, and it gets me very emotional when I share this story, but I never forget. It was a Saturday morning, and I already have a sponsor. I'm working the program. I'm committed. I'm committed to doing this. My son calls me. As I looked at my phone, I had like 12, 13 messages from him. So I step out of the meeting and I call him back, and I said, "What's up, son?" He says, "I hate you and I hate my life, and I don't want to live anymore." And I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "You and my mom has screwed up my life. I am miserable. My life was perfect until you guys decided to do this." So I stayed on the phone with him, and I just jumped in the car and I started driving home, keeping him on the phone, talking to him. And once I parked in the driveway, I said, "I'm outside, come outside, let's go for a ride." And during that time that he took to come out of the car, like this revelation came over me, and I realized that I was doing to my son the same thing that my parents had done to me unconsciously. Okay. I was victimizing my son by taking pity on myself and worrying about me problems and worrying about, and fucking up my relationship and screwing up my businesses. Let's face it, some of those things happen because they're going to happen. The economy, I couldn't save
Right.
it. But a lot of those behaviors manifested the gravity of what ended up happening to my life. The divorce with the wife, the not addressing the drinking issue, the not having closeness relationship with my parents before they passed. I had a lot of unresolved issue. And I realized that I was inflicting the same amount of pain that I always thought my parents had inflicted on me. Okay. And that was unfair to my son. If I brought him into the world, I had a responsibility to see his well-being, not to tarnish it, not to damage it, not to inflict pain on him. And he got on the car, we went for a long ride, and we talked, and I made one commitment to him. I said, I cannot, it's more than likely your mom and I are not going to get back together, but I will promise you something. I am going to do everything within my power to be there day, morning, and night, to be available, to take you to school, pick you up from school, do whatever you need. I will be there 24/7. So the pain that you're feeling right now is minimized. I can't change the other circumstances, but I will do my part. And I made a commitment to do that. And I'm proud to tell you that today my son is a junior at Oklahoma State University. He's tall, handsome, good looking, athletic, happy, joyous, and free. But then something else happened. The proceedings of the divorce became very, very tumultuous, very, very difficult, a lot of fighting, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of hatred. And I had not evolved emotionally. I was still very immature. I still had that 6-year-old little boy in a man's body, so I still reacted with a lot of pain and anger and resentment. And I remember one time, the judge threw me in jail for contempt of court, okay, because I failed to produce documents, financial statements for the divorce. And the judge threw me to jail during this procedure, my divorce proceedings, for contempt of court. And I spent 7 days in jail, okay, from Christmas Day, okay, Christmas Eve to January the 3rd or so. And it was the most difficult time in my life, but it was also the most revealing and the most awakening for my soul. Because for the very first time, I was able to look at myself in the room of disastrous, in a jail full of dysfunction, and people that didn't look like me, okay, people that were not like me, people that didn't come from my community, okay. But we were people, we were all people, we all had problems, and the problems revolve about the same issue, okay? Addiction, recovery, mental health, okay? And the lack of emotional intelligence. And that to me was a huge, huge, huge awakening for me to find myself in those circumstances. And I remember thinking for the very first time, what have I done to this woman that was the love of my life, that we got married in Italy, that we had a dream wedding, that we traveled through Paris, that we just, that we built a life together and created a son, that she hates me so much. And at that particular moment, I realized that it didn't matter what I did. I needed to change myself and make sure that I would never, ever, ever inflict that kind of pain on any human being for any reason, that I would feel or have them hate me or to talk to me so much as my ex-wife did. And there, the day I got out of jail, I went back home and Google, how do I become a better person? And when I Google, how do I become a better person, what came up was Mindvalley.
Was what?
Mindvalley,
Mindvalley?
the
Yeah.
development platform by Vish and Likiani,
Yeah.
and Christina. And I enrolled in the first course, and the first course was with Michael Beckwith, the pastor out of Los Angeles. And I heard him, I took his course, and that began my journey to personal development. That began my journey into transformation. And over time, he has morphed and morphed and morphed and morphed and morphed and morphed and morphed. And I like to consider myself a student of life, right? I like to consider somebody that wants to be able to learn, to contribute, and to give back. because I didn't have it. I didn't have those role models in my community. I didn't have the people that could tell me, even when I was making all kinds of money and I was fucking up, nobody told me that I was screwing up. And they didn't want to tell me because they didn't want to rock the boat. You know, I was the guy, I was the provider. I was the guy that made it, you know, quote unquote. So you don't tell the guy that made it that he's screwing up, right? I mean, you don't insult the done, right? And that was probably the biggest injustice that they did for me, you know, or the biggest injustice that we do to people, not asking them what's wrong when we are exhibiting behaviors that are dysfunctional.
It's too intrusive. It's none of my business, right?
Yeah,
It won't
yeah,
make, yeah. What are they
yeah.
going to think of me? It's, it's so funny because I have people come up to me all the time and say, 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, you said X to me. And I was so pissed. And I thought you were such an asshole. And you were right. And it changed my life. And I can't tell you how many times that's happened. And I don't, like, it's Tourette's. Like, I just say it. And I'm mortified when I heard what I said, but it was always like it was just something they needed to hear. And it's kind of interesting. It's hard to get people to speak up, to be intrusive in other people's lives, and then you lose people.
I,
That's just so unnecessary.
Yeah, your circle changes, but your circle is about to change too. You know, you taught me a lesson in our interview, and I never forget this because I use that quote, you know, every time that it permits, you know, and that is that every phase of our lives requires a different us. And I took that to heart during the interview that when I had you on the podcast. And I said, well, how am I showing up to my next phase? What is it different about me? What is it better? How am I impacting? You know,
So yeah, so I think for me, it was like, who does that person or who does this situation need me to be?
right, right. But at the same time, I take it in a very literal sense, right? What got me here won't get me there, right? So I have used my platform, including social media, as an extension of who I am, but a tool of who I want to become, right? So I don't use it for look at me what I'm doing. No, what is my purpose? How am I serving? How am I impacting others? Because I want my message to spread. I want that 6-year-old little Mexican kid in a poor neighborhood to hear my voice, or somebody from his community say, there's a chance, there's a possibility, there is a better life. Keep going. Don't give up. It gets better the harder you try.
That's so cool. Not only for your son, not only for your grandparents, but for that little 6-year-old boy that was you. And that's the thing I hammer that on all the time, is that it is not the 50-something-year-old person who is running this life. It is the 6-year-old, the 5-year-old, or whatever. The circumstances look like adult circumstances, but we're a little kid flailing around this big old world. I want to read a quote of yours that really stopped me in my tracks. Proper examination should ruin the life that you're currently living. Proper examination should ruin the life that you're currently living. It should cause you to leave relationships. It should cause you to reestablish boundaries with family members and with colleagues. It should cause you to quit your job. If it doesn't do that, it's not a real examination. If it doesn't come attached with destruction of your current life, then you can't create a new life in which you will not have the anxiety. That's crazy. That's so confrontational. I live that life, but to say that to someone is such a scary and bold and powerful thing. Why do you say that out in the world?
Well, most of us are afraid of making change. We stay in the comfort zone, not because it's comfortable, but because it's known. Okay. And it is easier to be complacent than to take action. And in order for me to change, everything around me has been disrupted, including my relationship with my siblings. I have 13 siblings. Okay. Out of 13, I have a very cordial relationship with all of them, but with a very close relationship with a handful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because my beliefs, my actions, my behaviors, my social media exposure is scary to them, because that's what roots them to their culture, to their social conditioning. And I scare them by bringing awareness to how dysfunctional that is.
Mm.
Okay. Just because you're in a certain place of complacency, that does not equate to a healthy environment. That does not equate, there was incest, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, poverty in my home. Who in the right mind wants to be part of that? No one. And if you don't break those cycles, if you don't disrupt those cycles, just like COVID has done for us, for all of us, okay, those systems continue to perpetuate. They continue to duplicate. They become cycles, okay, that create chaos and create dysfunction and create people that are not of good service to our communities. So we need to step forward, and we need to disrupt those systems in order to become better human beings. It was in my darker space, it was in the darkest times of my life that I was able to see my own light, my own power.
But that's the great dilemma. I had to lose everything to break open to become who I am. Like we talked about that time when I was stone cold sober, I lost everything. And I remember Pema Trojan, a quote from Pema Trojan, when we're broken, when tragedy happens, we have two choices. We can either close and harden or open and soften. And I literally chose to open and soften. But you lost everything. You broke open. You saw your son that day. And you went to jail and you made a change. I lost everything. I broke open. I made a change. How do we help people who things are good enough? Status quo is okay, to actually venture out into that dangerous part of that quote that I just read, to change something. Right? It's so scary. We got forced to do it. And now you and I run around the world yelling, really, you want to do what we did. You don't have to break. You don't have to lose everything to do what we did, but it's really fucking scary. So how do we get people to see that this side of the chasm is worth it?
I run several meeting rooms in Clubhouse on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And when I talk about this, I talk about making impact in the Latinx community. And it's not easy. It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge because there's a lot of people, as you stated, they don't want to change. The uncomfortable is comfortable, right? But the reality is that it takes a generation or two in order to impact that change, okay? It's no different than nature. It's no different than the weather. There's certain things that are affected. Our biggest teacher should be nature, should be the climate, how it moves and how it shifts, right? It sheds things that are no longer service. You go outside in a tree in the winter, the leaves are falling, okay? And then you come back in the summer and spring and it's blooming again. We need to do the same thing with us, okay? But
you're also, you're talking I Ching, right?
Right,
in the rhythms of nature.
Right. And we need to connect ourselves to that. We need to see that parallel in us. It was only when I saw that parallel in myself with nature that I was able to evolve. I can't evolve if I'm going against the grain. I cannot. I have to go with nature. I have to go to the universe. And in order to be able to do that, Mark, we need to be present. We need to be right here. And the reality is the majority of us live in a state of survival. And when you live in a state of survival, you have no clarity for creativity. You have no clarity for possibility. You have no clarity for dreams. But when you come to the present, when you exit, when you become present, when you become right here, you and I talking, nothing else matters. I don't see anything else but Mark and Peter. That is it. I can envision my future. I can envision my possibilities. I can see my dreams and I can walk towards them. There's nothing separating me from them. But it takes work to be able to do that. It takes
so much work.
It takes a lot of work. I'm rooted to what I call my 5 pillars. And I'm rooted to those. In order for me to come and have this dialogue with you, this conversation that I'm passionate about it enriches me by seeing a friend that we both have seen our transformation, I had to prepare myself for that. Okay? How do I do that? I pray, I meditate, I exercise, I journal, I write, I go for my walk. I work on my 5 pillars: physical, mental, spiritual, financial, and emotional, so I can give you all of me. I don't want to come here with 99% of me. I want to come to Mark, my friend, the guy that saw me 2 years ago, and saw my passion be even exploding because I see his passion exploding. And that is the only way that we make impact and we can change, by continue to have these dialogues, by continue to have this conversation and make them in the forefront. Not woo-woo, not crazy, not psycho, not he's drinking his own Kool-Aid, but part of our everyday life.
That's why I wanted you to come on and talk, because I'm trying to have these conversations with people who are rooted in the quote, I'm doing air quotes, the real world,
Yeah.
but bringing the solutions that look a little too far out for corporate America, for people who are just trying to make a living, so that we can start to make that shift. Because the answer is, uh, I don't think you do rip off the band. Like, I rip off the band-aid. If I don't like a job, I quit a job and I just tell them I'm not right for the job. I don't recommend that for anybody. I don't think anybody should do what I do. But you can make those incremental changes so your nervous system can move with you, right? Start to look for another job. Make sure your resume is up to date. Start to figure out what you're interested in. Get your network set up so that you can make a change. You don't have to just quit your job, but you should, be able to look at, am I happy here, or do I want to change? And then with the relationships, like, am I happy in this relationship? Do I want to change this relationship? Do I want to fix this relationship and put the work in, right? And then do I need to leave or do something differently? You can do these things incrementally, but you got to move.
Absolutely. Transformation is a savings account. You got to make a deposit every day.
Never
Every,
heard that. Never heard that before. Never heard that one.
every single day. And when if you are not balanced in those five pillars: physical, mental, emotional, financial, okay, and spiritual. The spiritual is your engine. The other four are your four tires. One goes out, you're hopping around. You're not operating to your maximum performance. So if you don't tend to them on a daily basis, you're gonna have a bad day. You're gonna have a fuck up day because you created the negative energy. You're not balanced. You're not balanced in any of those areas. But when you're balanced, you're able to have clarity and enter a state of flow. When you operate from a state of flow, you're in synchronicity with the universe. You are receiving the energy of the universe. It takes you and carries you, and you're able to see opportunities. Okay, you're able to see what you need to do and where you need to go. And what happens when you're in the other state, the state of survival, you can't see any of that. You're fucking worried about paying the rent, about the car payment, about your grandmother dying, about what's going to happen that usually never happens. But the reality is that those distractions keep you away from the opportunity to enjoy life to its fullest.
No question. Peter, I could talk to you all day. You and I could probably go on a rant, for 6 hours and not run out of things to talk about. I'm curious, when is this book coming out?
Well, we're hoping to release it in April. We're going to release it last March, and of course, March 13th, COVID hit, and we had to postpone it. We are working on the complete rebranding of what I call my brand, and I say that with a lot of humility, because we have integrated our message, into becoming a movement. So I want to make sure that I roll out a financial literacy course for the disadvantaged communities, my book, and a mastermind.
Oh, amazing. That's just so cool. So actually, I want to offer to be an advanced reader if you need an advanced reader, and if you need a blurb from a best-selling author. I've sold a shit ton of books. So but I can't wait for it to come out, and I will promote it as like crazy when it does, because you're such a wise, grounded guy, that I really want people to find you. So where can they find you if they absolutely have to have more of Peter Estevez?
Absolutely. I am on Instagram at Peter O Estevez. I'm also on Instagram for the podcast at Coming Clean Podcast. My website is at www.comingcleanpodcast.com. My profile is there. My media kit is there. Contact information is there. And of course, I'm at LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, and in many other platforms. Clubhouse. I don't know if you're familiar with Clubhouse or not.
I'm trying to avoid it as much as possible. But yes,
it's a very addicting platform. Very, very addicting, but it's a powerful platform.
I have a 10-hour drive tomorrow, so in between phone calls, I'm probably going. That's a great time to turn on Clubhouse and learn something. It's a cool thing.
Yeah.
So my recommendation is, if when you're done with the Mastering Midlife podcast, because in listening to every episode of my podcast, you must go to the Coming Clean podcast. It's not just for sobriety. The guests that Peter talks to are dream guests, and he has real substantive conversations, not the cookie cutter conversations where people are selling books on all the other ones. You should go find his podcast and you should listen to him. Peter, thank you for being here and bringing your wisdom and your magic.
Mark, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
To all of you, thank you for hanging with us. Thank you for hanging with all our ranting and raving and trying to sell you on a better life. We love you a ton. Have a great rest of the day.